Ehi compare, ci può suonare, chi si suona.
So welcome to our episode on acupuncture. Today we're going to learn about acupuncture, which is a form of traditional Chinese medicine that's first written about 2,500 years ago in the Emperor's Classic on Internal Medicine, the Yellow Emperor's Classic on Internal Medicine, and is alive and well today. So acupuncture can do a bunch of things for you. The first thing is it can really lower your stress response and modify your cortisol. It can lower your stress hormones. It can calm your limbic system. So that part of your brain that's in charge of emotional reactivity, fear, can get calm from acupuncture. It can increase your heart rate variability, which is really great for your long-term health, but also great for emotional regulation. And it can really help you to feel calm and relaxed and profoundly affect how you behave. So today we're lucky we have Travis, our acupuncturist, with us who will be doing a live demonstration. But first I'm going to give you some examples of how we've used it, and then some of the history of our organization and how we met Travis, and then a little bit about my favorite research. So let me give you some examples first. And these are sort of interesting because I think they make the point not only about acupuncture, but about community acupuncture and the protocol that Travis has brought to us. So the first example is a fellow calls me and says, I'm having a really hard time. Can I come and see you? And I say, sure, come on over. And he wants to talk about some discussion he just had with his friend, which ended very negatively, and he was quite upset about it. And he really wanted to talk about a solution to what had happened. And he wanted to feel better by talking about what had happened between him and his friend. And in fact, he couldn't do that at all. His body was just not in a position to be able to have a discussion. So the conversation kept going back to threats and anger and yelling about his friend, at which point I said to him, I don't think your body's ready to have this kind of conversation. And I think if we went and got a treatment from Travis, that you might be able to do it. And so he agreed. Travis was actually closed, and he was in there sweeping up. We called him on the way over, and he said, sure, come on over, I'll give you a treatment. We went in, we had our treatment. Pretty soon, both of us were at least unconscious and maybe sound asleep, I'm not sure which. And when we got out of the chair, he looked quite different. And when we went outside, he said to me, you know, I haven't felt this way since I was a very little boy. So he just felt this sense of peace and calm. And I said, so what should we do about your friend? What do you want to do about that? And he said, well, you know, he was upset and I was upset. And there's really nothing to talk about. We'll both get over it. You know, acupuncture put him in the right state to be able to think that way. I couldn't have talked him through that because I tried. So it's really very useful for that kind of thing. And community acupuncture is different than acupuncture that's delivered in kind of a medical context. So most acupuncturists, you have to call them, make an appointment, you know, come next Tuesday at 9 o'clock. Well, for Dave in this situation, it would have been no help, right? He needed help in the moment. And so what Travis has put together is a community acupuncture clinic. And so you can walk in and you can get treatment when you need it. So really, the things to think about in terms of this discussion are how effective the treatment is, but also how available it is and how affordable it is. And I think we'll talk more about that in a bit. The second example is really about this kid, Allie, who has struggled her whole life. She's a very traumatized kid, really struggled her whole life with the capacity to regulate herself and kind of behave the way that she wants to. And she often gets overwhelmed and can't really do the things that she'd like. So we got her started in acupuncture, and when we start a new person in acupuncture, Travis actually comes to us. We don't go to the clinic. And we get all of the person's closest people, their support staff and family or whomever, around the table, and Travis gives us, needles all of us, not just the person, right? So not only do they get the benefit, but everybody else who's going to support them in going to the acupuncture clinic also gets the benefit and sees in real time what it feels like. So when she started acupuncture, Travis came to us, needled everybody. She felt pretty good. Everybody sort of appreciated it. And then after Travis left, she said, I said, so let's set up a regular schedule. And she said, I don't want to go. And I said, well, how come? She said, well, I don't think it'll help. And I said, well, it just helped. And she said, yeah. So I said, well, is there something we can do to help you get there? And she said, well, if you go with me, I'll go. And it was really interesting to do that because I could see her, again, in real time, what it was like for her to go to acupuncture and then receive acupuncture. So she would actually get more anxious going to acupuncture than she was at baseline. But then when she got in, the acupuncture would calm her down. So we went for about 2 months together. And at the end of that time, she was really quite quiet in the chair and really was enjoying the treatments. And she said to me, you know, I'm good now. You don't need to come with me every week. But then about a month later, she invited me to go. And I went to the clinic with her. And initially, she had spent a lot of her time just talking, even when the needles were in, which is sort of inappropriate for the for the clinic. But Travis never complained about it. Anyway, after a month goes by and I go with her, she gets in the chair and she doesn't say a word. And pretty soon she's out cold. So she's so calm and relaxed that she's either unconscious or asleep. And at the end of the session, Travis starts taking the needles out. She doesn't budge. And he says, I have a really hard time waking her up. So anyway, it's really been quite effective and quite useful for her. I think the lesson in there for us is that even if people don't appreciate it at first, give them the support they need to get there. And then over time, their body will come to anticipate the positive effects of acupuncture, and they'll be more inclined to go. Excuse me, and that's exactly what happened with her. The last example I want to use is about this young fella, Cal, who has autism. He's a mid-20s, 25, 26. I've known him for better than 10 years, but since he was a child, he's really always had GI tract problems. And many people with autism do have that. And certainly many people who have been traumatized have problems with their GI tract. So Cal had very large stools, often was either constipated or had diarrhea or some combination thereof. When he passed the stool, often it was very, very big and very painful and very hard. And in fact, you couldn't even flush him. They had to be chopped up to get him down the toilet. And around the bowel stuff, he often would get aggressive and hit the people who help him because he was in so much pain. And we took him to all the specialists there are in this part of New England, which includes some very big universities. And 5 or 6 years of treatment, monkeying his, medicine around really didn't help very much. And so we used acupuncture as part of an overall treatment plan. When you look at the research, they're interested in what does acupuncture do. When you look at what we do in the community, we're interested in treatment. We're interested in people getting better, so we give them the full court press. We may be using multiple interventions at the same time. So in this case, with Cal, we started with acupuncture 3 times a week. And that was really useful in getting his body just calm. But in addition to that, we had a probiotic. We used a kimchi, fermented vegetable, to sort of replenish the biome in his GI tract. And we also, if you remember the episode on water immersion, on swimming, we also put him in the water every day. And that would lower his cortisol, the stress hormone, lower his vasopressin, activate his GI tract. And it's been about 4 or 5 months now, and we haven't had any aggression, and we haven't had any toileting problems. So he's been able to go regularly. Pretty fantastic. And again, I think acupuncture is a great standalone treatment, but certainly very useful in terms of a larger treatment plan. So let me tell you how we got into it. In our town here, like many small towns, there's a farmer's market. And the farmer's market is really busy with vegetable stands and pizza makers and a band and a bandstand and lots of kids running around. And I make my weekly entrance with my 3 grandchildren and usually an entourage of some sort. And it's quite a busy place. And so one day I'm walking around looking for my usual fix of arugula, and I encounter Travis, who's set up under a canopy right in the middle of the park, in the middle of all of this action that's going on. And he's got 4 or 5 chairs with people in them, all of whom are in a state I would like to get people in. Very relaxed. And so I stopped to talk to Travis, and he explains to me not only the model of community acupuncture, but also the NADA protocol, which I'll talk about in a second. So I had looked into acupuncture previously, but the problem is that, again, with the medical model, not only is it, I'll see you next Tuesday at 10 o'clock, but it's at least $75 to over $100 per treatment, which is a significant amount of money, obviously, and really is unaffordable for most of the people that we know who could take advantage of it. Certainly unaffordable if you're going to do it 3 times a week. So he explained to me the community acupuncture model. There's about 200 clinics around the country now that provide this model, and it's both a business model and a treatment model. And so it was really alluring to think that we could just walk into the clinic and get a treatment when we needed it. And the other thing is that, you know, essentially I have people who are dysregulated, whose behavior is sort of unmanageable, and then I want to approach them and tell them we're going to stick needles in you. People don't respond all that well, but Travis had the NADA protocol, which is these 5 ear points. They're sympathetic, Shen-men, liver, lungs, and kidneys. But it has a real calming effect on the body. And it just takes under a minute for Travis to put those needles in. And so it's really very quick and very effective. So he told me about those things. I went back and reviewed some of the research, and we gave it a try. So we have now a long-standing relationship, I think. I was at his clinic one day, and the group I work with, we had all the chairs filled. It was all of the clients served by my agency, plus a number of the staff. So his whole place was filled with our folks. And people have reported just great results. So I'm very appreciative of him and what he's been able to do for us. And so here's the way it usually happens. Travis is going to do the NADA protocol on me, and you'll see how quick it is. And then he's doing it in a group. You can see how quick it'll be for the entire group. So, Travis, please.
The great thing about NADA is that you can do it pretty much anywhere. So we're sitting here on bar stools, and I wouldn't recommend doing it at a bar. Why not? But we just very quickly find the different points, and this is something that people who do the NADA protocol, some are licensed acupuncturists, some are certified by the AcuDetox, which is the organization that certifies people for doing NADA that are not necessarily licensed acupuncturists, depending on state regulations, and it's quick and easy. So you do one. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then you can move on to the next.
And I didn't even feel any of those needles go in. So
there's the sympathetic. We've got one. It's called Shen-men, which is a relaxation point. It's actually called Spirit Gate if you translate. It's liver, kidney, and lung. All right, so going on to the next person. How does that feel? Your first needle ever?
Yeah. Doesn't really feel like anything. Like
Great.
you can't feel it.
All right. So in community acupuncture, we have a saying: the best way to get people to do acupuncture is to get people to do acupuncture. So we now hopefully have a convert.
brilliant.
And one more. Now, generally, I like to make sure that the people, if they're sitting up, that hopefully they have a back on their chair so they can relax a little bit and enjoy the endorphin release that will inevitably come.
And you know, I can feel a difference in my body state as soon as the needles get in.
Yeah.
And in fact, now when I go to the clinic, right, I can anticipate before I even get into the chair, my body starts to calm down.
Yeah. And we also say that the root of our treatments in community acupuncture is actually the room. So getting to that space, it's kind of like if you're somebody who meditates, it's like just sitting on your cushion will start you getting you to that meditative state. So coming into the clinic will already start the process. Yeah.
So one time, virtually every time I go, Travis is able to put the needles in just in a minute or so. And one time I came and there were a number of clients there, so I had to wait about 5 minutes. And I started to pass out. And Travis came in, I said, is it time to pull the needles? And he said, well, I haven't put them in yet.
And NADA, by the way, has an interesting history. It was, do you want me to talk about that?
Sure, that'd be
That's
great.
one of my favorite things. It was developed in the early 70s, I believe, through kind of, it was, from my understanding, it was a little bit of a trial and error, trying to figure out the best way to treat people for heroin addiction. And it was developed by at the Lincoln Detox Center, which was in the Bronx, which was kind of developed, set up to help people who were addicted to heroin and other narcotics, especially coming in from the COINTEL program. The hospital was taken over at one point by the Black Panthers and the Young Lords, and one of the acupuncturists was Mutulu Shakur, and the other Michael Smith, who just passed away a couple months ago, and they came up with this. This is if you notice the 5 points, 2 are very calming, and 3 are the body's filters. So you have the kidneys and the liver and the lungs, which filter what you take in and what you are passing out, along with the regulatory regulating the nervous system, as well as just giving you some calming. So it's a really well balanced protocol, and it works for. It's been studied a bunch and pretty extensively, and shown to help all sorts of different situations. I kind of almost use it on or a variance of it on just about everybody who walks in the clinic, because it's got such wide-ranging uses, and I think it benefits so many people.
Okay, so now some of my favorite research. This is a bit of research I had encountered prior to meeting Travis. And again, we're back to this limbic response, this emotional system that is the core of driving your fight-flight response, which is really behind some of the kind of behaviors that we want to slow down. And there's a woman, Yui, from Harvard, who had done some brain scans of the limbic system while people got acupuncture. And in fact, what it did was dampen down your limbic system, dampen down your fear response, and make it less likely that you'd behave poorly. So that was pretty convincing to see a brain on acupuncture. The next study is maybe one of my favorites. It's on CBT, or cognitive behavioral therapy, and acupuncture. And most studies that are done are generally a technique like acupuncture or CBT versus placebo. So a treatment versus no treatment, and the difference between those two. In this case, we have a standardized and well-researched treatment in cognitive behavior therapy, and then we test acupuncture versus cognitive behavior therapy. And what we found is that not only did acupuncture perform as well as cognitive behavior therapy, but it was actually better in some cases. And the biggest thing is that at the end of this study, about a third of the people who did the CBT no longer had PTSD symptoms, so they were essentially cured of the PTSD. However, about 2/3 of the acupuncture group no longer met the criteria for PTSD. So about twice as many people improved beyond the PTSD with acupuncture, which is really quite startling. And the other thing is that if you think about affordability and availability, well, CBT is also the medical model. You know, next Tuesday at 10 a.m. is my session. Between now and next Tuesday at 10 a.m., if you have a problem, you don't get a treatment unless they can squeeze you in. Again, you can walk into Travis anytime and get a treatment. Also, the cost of CBT is probably even more expensive than acupuncture in that it's at least $100 an hour and probably between $100 and $150 if you can find a practitioner. So Travis can serve, 8 people in the time that a clinician doing CBT can serve one, and just as effectively. Third study I want to talk about, and this is really a great study because, the previous study is on PTSD, and it's a very difficult disorder to treat. Cutting or self-injurious behavior, also very difficult to treat. And there's really no established effective treatment for it. So therapy tends to improve people regardless of the type of therapy, but it's not very dramatic and it's not very quick. So in this study, it's an inpatient, outpatient group that's studied, and which means that the people in the study can get what they call in the business sharps. They can get things to cut themselves when they start to feel dysregulated. So the idea behind cutting is that when my emotional pain gets too high, I turn on my physical pain, and it takes away the emotional pain. It's a way to cope with this dysregulation and pain. However, there's all kinds of outcomes that are not positive, like being cut, to say nothing of shame, guilt, and other things that usually go along with it. So in this study, had I designed it, it would have been quite different, but no one called me and asked about the design criteria. But it's one treatment of acupuncture per week for 3 weeks. So we would always go at 3 treatments per week until people seem to get better. So it would probably extend beyond the 3 weeks. But this is one treatment a week for 3 weeks. And in the beginning of the study, people are cutting themselves on average of about 3 times a week. At the end of a month, so a week after treatment ended, the people in the acupuncture group are cutting themselves about 0.4 times per week. So you got about an 87% reduction in cutting over a very short period of time. Really, really dramatic results. And over time, what happens is there is no more treatment. If you come out at about a month after treatment ends, people are cutting themselves more, but it's still 50% less than the initial study. So I think there's a couple things to learn from it. Primarily, it's a very effective treatment that should carry on for a whole lot longer and give people a coping mechanism that means they don't have to turn to cutting. And the last group of studies I want to talk about, we'll bring it back to developmental disabilities for a moment and people with autism. There's lots of studies on autism and acupuncture. And overall, those studies report significant changes in self-care, cognition, language, communication, all kinds of things, receptive language. But then if you look at the review studies on acupuncture, there's actually 2, one in 2011, one in 2012, and the references will be in here, but one says very little results, very little positive results. The other one says positive results in every study. So the literature's a little confusing because I don't think acupuncture really lends itself to kind of traditional Eastern research because each practitioner practices differently. So anyway, I think that the lesson from that one is you got to try it and look at the clinical results. If people get better, it's useful. And some people may not, but we actually haven't experienced that. So my suggestion is you get out there, find a Travis, get some needles put in, and feel a whole lot better.